we're live.
We are. Welcome to our 19th episode.
Brent and Chris talk.
Brent and Chris talk. Howdy, partners and partnerettes. No, I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah, don't do that.
No, that didn't work.
That one didn't work. It's alright.
Still working for my signature
intro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the outro. Have a nice day. Have a nice week.
I know. I was doing "We Are Back" for so many times, but
yeah.
So we're back.
We are.
You can have that one if you want. We can trade off.
That's an interesting idea. Yep.
So, this is an interesting episode because yet again we're going to do something different.
A departure.
Not just straight up go down the political path, which we could do every episode. Believe me, there's plenty of dialogue for that. But in lieu of that, there's been other things we've been talking about that we think are cool and that we thought you ought to know.
Yeah.
So,
tied in.
What are we talking about?
In this episode, we're going to be re-examining the lessons we have been taught in our history classes growing up. Maybe there's a little bit more to the story.
Well, I think if you sit there and think back to history of any kind, a class you've taken, and if you think that's everything that ever happened is what you've learned, then you're crazy. I mean, there's people out there, which I'm not, trying to poo-poo too much. I'm just saying that if you're, I'm just going to call it out, naive enough to think that everything that's written down is all there ever was, then, I mean, you're definitely missing something.
Correct. So
no way around it.
If you are a fan of Egypt, if you are a fan of history, or if you're a fan of
the world,
grand theories of life and religion,
and things of substance, not just complete conspiracy and whatever woo woo. That's what they call it on Rogan's podcast, is woo woo.
Woo woo. Yeah.
I don't like that per se, but we're going off facts here as usual. So everything you're going to hear from us is stuff that's concrete. Nothing that, and it'll all be linked below.
Right. And any departures from the stuff, as we like to do our own takes on the stuff.
Yeah, and we'll give our opinions. We'll tell you.
Absolutely.
That way you don't get confused.
So stay tuned. It's going to be fun. And but first, how was your week?
My week was great. Really. Courtney was busy with the work function that took up most of her days and evenings, so the kids and I had some quality time. And, it went fast. You know how it is when you've got the kids. You've been there. You are there.
2 weeks ago.
So, I mean, I'd say it went well. Work, just lots of good opportunities there to move my career along, which I think is awesome in a company. And being in healthcare is kind of interesting, too. So, one thing I learned, I work for OSF, so full disclaimer there. I'm not promoting or not promoting them, either way, right? But they're going to have one of the most advanced cancer treatments in the world live, I think in the year 2023 is what they're saying now.
Wow.
It's like this proton pencil beam technology. And the whole thing is like literally it shoots like this is a Sharpie, it's not a pencil, but you can use your imagination, folks. Like if you have a tumor somewhere, it like shoots the protons that it generates into that area, and it doesn't like go through it. It doesn't like hurt all the stuff around it, because there's like secondary cancer is now a big thing where people got cancer treatment like 20, 25 years ago, and now they're having secondary cancer from the radiation they got to treat the initial cancer.
Wow.
Yeah, well, it's harsh. It's very hard on your body. Like you've seen people that are going through it. So I mean, it's terrible. But, I mean, it's life-saving, too, so it's like one of those double-edged swords. So, and that's just it. When they first started, like, using radiation technology, people didn't live. Like, if you had cancer and they just removed it and they didn't do any radiation, a lot of times it had metastasized and spread. So, I mean, they didn't live 20, 25 years. So now you've got that. And so the cool thing is, what I'm saying is, Peoria is going to be on the map. I think it'd be like one of 2, maybe 3 of this advanced nature. This technology exists elsewhere, but this is going to be from the scratch, built by the manufacturer and put in. And they're like putting up buildings and redoing all the campus up there. They're putting, I think it's like $200 million into this.
Wow.
So
I mean, they'll get that back in like 2 treatments.
Yeah.
Refer to our other episodes.
For what it's worth, I will say that like my job is very focused on costs, savings, and elimination. And it's not totally, I'm not saying there's not greedy people out there, but I don't believe, at least where I work, it's totally lost on people that we've got to do everything we possibly can to lower the cost of healthcare. Like, that's a legitimate thing people are trying to do.
Well, no, and I was by no means.
No, you're right though.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. It's
pharmaceutical
crazy.
companies.
All of it. We're
for
completely
the drugs.
subject to it. Yeah,
Right.
Drugs, treatment, man. Like every time I go to get take my kids to the doctor, they're like, "You want to pay the balance?" And it's just like, no, I have a plan. Like, I just pay every so much because I always have a running balance.
Yeah, I know.
And it's a lot. It's not just like $50. $50 I paid off.
I know.
But
It's
like,
ridiculous.
I know. Like, I can't. Like, it's one, go to the just walk in the door of the specialist for Warren for his respiratory thing. $200 just to walk in the place, and then if they do anything, it's like another $200-$300. So you're talking $500 a shot, and he goes every quarter.
We're waiting to get the bill for the endocrinologist.
Yeah. It just happens. So how was your week? Let's talk about more happy things. Not happy.
Yeah,
I thought that was going to be a good segment, but that just like nosedived into the ground, so I apologize.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Everybody's going to be like, "You're an asshole."
No,
which is sometimes true.
No, my week. I had a rough week early on with passing of my grandma, and it was something she'd been sick. I didn't personally realize it was so close, despite the things my mom had been telling me. With much more experience, I just thought she seems okay. So, I got to see her a couple of days before she passed away, and I took Harry and Evelyn up there, and Chelsea was there, and I got to go get her a cheeseburger from McDonald's, and hung out with her for a few hours. We had a lot of good conversations, wonderful last memories to have, and
it's important.
Yeah, she passed away in the presence of her best friend, so that's they
quite
were just talking, and she just kind of slipped into a kind of a sleep state, and called the priest in, did last rites, and she was gone. So, of ways to go, I'm put that up there on top of acceptable ways.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before. I would much rather fade away gracefully than have some abrupt or
We've been watching King Kong a lot, me and Harrison, and like, oh god, I don't know how long I keep doing this, explaining like, oh, he's fine.
They know, man. They're smarter than we know. That's for sure.
Yeah, the guy that got stepped on by a spider and impaled through his face. No, he's fine.
Totally fine. He's gonna go put a Band-Aid on and walk that off.
He just got stepped on. It's okay. Oh, that guy that got ripped. He's fine.
We don't really. I mean, I'm not criticizing. I don't think we have to address that for the most part yet. They haven't really been too curious. Like Eleanor's called things as like dead before, but I don't think. I think it's more of a concept than ever understood. Right.
Yeah, we're not sure how to address it with Harry. When my grandpa died, we said he just went to heaven. We had grandpa to go to heaven, and that was okay. He was younger then, didn't have as many questioning abilities. So services will be next week. We'll see if we do a show next week. Timing's going to be a little tough with all that, but it's one of those things that, gosh,
fact of life, man. They're gonna have to. They have to know. It's not fair to just like sugarcoat the thing. I've heard it's best to be honest, but not like brutally honest, obviously.
And of conversations I'm comfortable having with my son, I think death is the most uncomfortable for me personally. Everything else I'm pretty solid on, I feel good on, but I don't know the right answers. Especially when you're 3, I don't want to cause fear. A fear of this stuff. I
think still keeping more broad context rather than very specific things is probably fine.
I know. I looked at Mr. Rogers and how he helped describe things to kids, because
Sesame Street's a good one too.
Yeah. So, I say still a lot of time with my family, though, but, figuring out arrangements and stuff like that, and just learning about my grandma, learning things I didn't know.
Oh yeah, isn't that weird?
It is, and the show is odd in weird ways, because the research we do here, a lot of it doesn't make it onto the show, and a lot of things go different weird. So when we were talking at the funeral home about planning my grandma's obituary, my uncle said, well, she was an odd fellow. And I've researched the Odd Fellows, and it kind of came up in this show. Not really, we're not going to get there, but the Odd Fellows was kind of this, I don't want to say secret organization, because it wasn't, but they were all about doing the good thing. Their biggest guiding light was the Golden Rule. And you can't be an Oddfellow were the men of the club. And I was like, well, that means she was a Rebecca. And they were daughters of Rebecca, was the women version of the Oddfellows.
Okay.
So, got to throw some helpful information in there. Felt a little bit useful. It's the one thing I could help and contribute to there. So, I did that, and, that was really my week.
That was your week?
That was really my week. Yeah. That was the thing.
That's enough.
Yeah, I still have homework I have to do tonight. I stayed caught up with acoustics. That was my biggest fear. I just got so behind the beginning of the week with everything, and it's just hard. It's hard. Math's hard for me. Like, this stuff is hard for me because, like, I'm good with things I can comprehend and understand. Mm-hmm. But when we're talking about, like, theoretical concepts of measuring sound waves and stuff like that,
yeah,
that's hard. That's hard for me to be like, oh, all right, well, I have to do this now because this is happening.
Well, it's not only boring as can be, but I mean, like...
That too. Well,
I'm not saying the class is boring, like the concepts, but, like, when you get to the nitty-gritty,
yes,
you're probably just, like, nodding off.
Right. Well, and the one thing that saved it this week in acoustics was it was measuring my own studio. It was measuring our space here and finding out the rate of decay for the reverberations.
I mean, I'd say it's about 1.25 Brents tall square.
You know, it's funny you say that because it actually is about 1 point something meters tall, but...
That's funny.
Yeah, interesting. And so I know the rate of decay of this room, and it was interesting because I had to actually take into account, you can't see them, well, you can back there, the cinder block walls with paint on them. They have an acoustic absorbency rate, and then I do a different one for the walls that are drywall, and different for the ceiling, different for the carpeted floor, all the different absorption rates play in it. It got so boring. I know, I'm sorry.
No, man, I'm not bored. I'm, like, looking around thinking to myself, like,
Mm-hmm.
So that's our whatever insulation. What if it was a higher insulation? Like, would that matter?
Mm-hmm.
More dense?
Yeah.
And you painted this drywall. Does that matter?
Yep.
That's moldboard, right?
Yep. I'm sure that probably does too, but that wasn't in the list of options.
Damn it.
They had carpet on
email
concrete
your teacher and
floor.
be like, look,
I know.
I don't have moldboard in here. I need help. What's the density of that?
Well, and it was like carpet floor or carpet on padded floor. I mean, it got really specific, and then there were drapes, and it even had, if you had, like, you were doing a room with a pool in it, they gave you a water reflection.
What about a room with a painting of a tree?
I'm sure you could do that.
I mean, you have one right there.
That's true. And then you have to measure from the speakers to the receivers, and then it just gets so crazy.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many things tie into the room, though, because the idea of what you're measuring is how fast is the energy decay. Is the question. And that kind of comes up in some of the things we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Cool.
Are you ready to dive in?
Yeah.
Ready to bend your mind?
Yep. It's going to be bent. It's already bent, but...
I want to do full disclosure on this one. Some of the things we're going to talk about here are out there. Like, they're just flat out there. We're going to start very much in the realm of reality, and then we're just going to take a left turn.
There's things that are not totally understood, so I think that hopefully people that are listening that know much about history can appreciate that.
Right. And I think there's, listening to these people talk.
We're trying to go down a crazy path. Like,
right.
For sure, there's limits.
Yes. And I think listening to this interesting take on time and history has really made me aware of all the assumptions that we've made before this and taken for granted.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So let's dive in. What if history is wrong? What if the stories we're taught in our classes are incorrect? And what if civilization is actually much older? And what if we were more advanced in a previous time?
Mm-hmm. More focused on that than civilization being older. Like, civilization, like, there's been people's types of people, like, different Denisovians, and we're not going to talk about that per se, but you know what I mean, like different types of humans.
We're talking about advanced civilizations.
We're talking more like, the civilization, the cultural advancement that there's clear evidence of that predates the majority of what you're taught.
And we're going to ask or pose the question, try to answer the question, what happened to these advanced civilizations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And maybe how did we end up with the story that we tell today?
Well, yeah, and why don't we have more in the way to show for it?
Right.
That's an important question.
So one of the things I want to ask before we dive in is, do you think we could forget technology? Do you think we could actually forget pieces of ourselves or pieces of technology that would be relevant or helpful in today's world?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, too.
So, just simple things like, okay, our phones.
Yep.
I'm not going to go down the path you may think I am.
Nope, with you.
This phone utilizes satellites.
Yep.
Right? So the satellites up there are in, I think it's called
geosynchronous orbits.
Yeah. And so it's that they're on a certain altitude, and there's atmosphere up there higher than we think up to. It gets thinner as you go into outer space. But all the satellites, for the most part, are in some kind of atmosphere. Like, they're up there, but they're not. They're in space. Mm-hmm. But, like, the defined realm of, like, edge of space is there's still an atmosphere there. It's like 80-some thousand feet, I think, or something like that. So many miles up. Anyways. So those satellites are spinning around up there. If for some reason we don't tend to them, we don't make sure their orbits aren't crisscrossing or they don't get too close, or if something happens, like it gets hit by a meteorite or something, and they need to course correct because it's going to fly into something, or if it's going to crash land, to make sure it flies into the ocean and not into a populous area. If we're not there to do that, that's all gone. And if that all crashes into the Earth and is given much time at all, you may, all those bits and pieces of metal are going to get crunched up, and it's going to burn up largely in the atmosphere. So think about what of that would be left if you fast forward even a couple hundred years.
Sure. That's great.
You have to know where to look.
One of the things I wanted to talk about was the Laos Plateau.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is in China. It's 250,000 square miles in north central China. And it's believed to be one of the earliest cradles of Chinese civilization.
Yep.
And because of that, it was once highly fertile. And the land was, it underwent desertification.
Yes.
Got there. Because people just farmed it too much. They put too many animals that could handle on it. They didn't respect the land.
Yeah, didn't take care of it.
Yep. So Laos actually comes from the German word for loose, because the soil was so loose that it would wash so much away into the Yellow River every time it would flood. Well, in 1994, the Watershed Rehabilitation Project was launched to rehabilitate the land. And what they did was they required people to change animal husbandry practices, encourage natural regeneration of grasslands, and through terracing. Do you know what terracing is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so terracing, a piece of sloped land that gets cut into a series of flat surfaces.
It's like steps.
Yes, exactly.
Majorly popular, like in mountainous regions.
Right. And now I know what you're going to say. Well, Chris, none of this stuff was forgotten. That's why they did it. But here's the thing. They let it get so bad. They had the technology at hand for the hundreds, if not thousands of years it took for this land to erode, and they chose not to do anything about it.
Right.
So I think that counts as forgetting.
Yeah.
And for what I think today's show, I think I'm going to count that as forgetting.
Well, you think at some point before, so let's talk about when the Europeans were coming over here and there was the indigenous populations, right? They were coming over here and wiping them out with smallpox. They weren't shooting them all because they didn't have to.
Yep.
But there had to have been some leap. And we know that the indigenous populations here, they fought each other and were brutal, between each other's clans. But they largely had a different belief system, and, they respected the land largely. Like they tried to keep things in balance.
Yeah.
And then contrast that with some leap that had to have been made, probably with religion. Largely speaking for Western Europe, right? Some leap was made that something like, in my mind, this is probably Brent theory, not widely accepted theory, but when you start thinking along the lines of, well, God put us here on Earth to rule over our common fellow because we're kings or we're popes or whatever. Once that leap is made and you start that conquest type mentality, I think that's when you stop respecting at least certain layers of things. Like if you think you own something else or are superior to it,
yep.
If you start considering your fellow man animals, which has happened multiple times in history. So I don't know. I just sort of think that kind of thing too. That's how it's forgotten. Like you make these leaps of whatever understanding or acceptance, and then that just kind of goes off a slippery slope.
Well, and that's the thing. Just to finish on the terror scene, that goes all the way back to the Hanging Gardens of Babylon.
Oh, yeah.
That's how they were built.
The mythical.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they found... What is it? I mean,
mythical in the sense that there's like the stories told.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So...
And how did they, pipe the water through it and all that?
Yes. And...
Technology.
Yes. And just another silly one. Why not? Yeah. Kodak... The film company, Kodak, they developed the first digital camera in 1975. The technology was bad. It was like a 1 megapixel camera or 0.1 megapixel. Very not good, bad. And, but they knew that the technology was not going to be good for their sales, for the film that they were going to sell. So they pretty much just sat on the technology. Though today they still own several of the patents.
Sure.
They knew it was going to happen. They just didn't want to bring it forward. So I think we can see relatively recent in our history that information is controlled for benefits.
Yeah.
And not always given to us at the time it's found out.
Right. Not everybody understands all that technology.
Wonderful. Exactly. And if you want to know more about the Laos Plateau, really I encourage you to look it up. There's a wonderful documentary done by John D. Liu, and it's called Hope in a Changing Climate. He was, pretty sure he was a journalist or photojournalist sent to the Laos Plateau to capture it, the rehabilitation, and he was just blown away. He's like, man can change the climate. Man can have control over this. Mm-hmm. And he's really spent the rest of his life doing that. He's now, last I checked, he's working in Syria on doing a big reforestation project there.
Wow.
And the one thing that's amazing, when you look at the people on the Laos Plateau and stuff, they're not using tractors. They're just digging. They're doing it by hand. I mean, this is...
And like teams of animals pulling plows.
Yeah. I mean, this is not something that you need to... I think it's interesting that we've had this ability to work one with nature, to keep nature a certain way. Mm-hmm. And maintain a balance with it. And we just let that go.
Well, okay, here's another thing I just thought about, because you're right. We, humans, have always manipulated their environment to suit us.
That's where I disagree.
Well, we're wearing clothes.
But we'll get into that.
Okay, well, that's fine. But I'm going to stick with my thought that we pretty much manipulate the environment to suit us in everything. So, think about it. Like, we want to survive. We're like pack animals because we figured out that cooperation benefits us more than fighting, having every man for themselves, right? So that cooperation allows us to work in teams, which a lot of animals can't do. And so we manipulate, and like we're the ones that domesticated dogs, and we've changed animals from
I'm going to push back
horses
on that,
and
just
cows.
on the dogs, because dogs very much domesticated themselves in some ways too. Corn is a good example. But I'm going to push back on all this stuff.
Sure.
We'll get there.
Okay.
Because we're still on the same page on a lot of this
Yeah,
stuff.
we agree for the most part. That's when I'm going to stake my claim in the sun right now. We'll talk some more about that.
Because, we're going to debate what is advanced mean. And I think that's some great thing.
Okay.
So, where is the evidence, you would ask? Where can we build this hypothesis that history is wrong?
Right.
Or that history is forgotten
Incomplete.
itself? Incomplete. Great. Well, let's start with the Sphinx.
Okay.
Egyptian music. I don't know.
Yeah.
So Egyptian music, Q. And the Sphinx, it is claimed to be built 2,500 BCE by Egyptologists.
Right.
That's the current widely held claim.
Yep.
But there was a man named, you introduced me to him, John Anthony West.
Yep, John Anthony West.
Introduced me to his work, I should say.
Yep, Dr. Robert Schoch.
And yes, Robert Schoch is a huge one too.
There was actually, if I may,
a
precursor that kind of introduced the ideas they ran with. I'm not
so
R.A.
Schwaller.
Dlubitz. I probably said that last name wrong. He's French, so I butchered his name probably, but he's important.
Yes.
So sorry, Sir Anthony.
And I feel bad because I'm definitely starting with people who are piggybacking off their work, and I don't really do much on them.
No, it's all good. Yeah, those guys are important.
Great.
Mr. West and Mr. Schoch.
Yes, so Mr. West is an American writer, and he claims that the erosion on the Sphinx was caused by water, not wind and sand.
Right.
Because it's a vertical erosion.
Right.
And the issue with that is the last time there would have been rain in Egypt
to cause that erosion
would have been the Younger Dryas.
Right. Which
Younger
is like
Dryas.
the 5th or 6th millennia BC.
So, yes, let's do the Younger Dryas real quick, if you don't care.
Yep.
It's believed to be 12,800 to 11,600 years ago.
Yep.
And there's a lot of evidence, I guess it would be geological evidence on this.
Yeah, so basically we're talking about epochs, like time frames where massive change in the climate took place. And so the Younger Dryas is one of those.
A mass extinction event.
Yep,
the
that's what
most
took place.
recent.
Yep.
And
it took place when, and
What's crazy about this one, if you will, though, is they think that at 12,800 years ago, there was a meteor that came, and it caused this massive cooling. They think it may have hit in the North American ice caps,
right.
Which is why it would be really hard to find an impact crater, because it would have been in an ice cap that then would have melted.
Right, and then there's subsequent cooling that covered that up.
Correct. And so, And then, 11,600, another meteor, they think. This is where we're speculating.
There are debates about whether the meteor or if it was a solar mass ejection, this SME concept. And that's
CME,
basically...
coronal mass ejection.
Coronal mass ejection, I'm sorry. But that's the concept of the sun emitting powerful waves of radiation and all kinds of things that impact
and
us.
there's evidence of both of these things, to be perfectly
we know it happens,
honest.
correct, they know it happens.
Yes, and that's the thing. There is there was an agreement now that the Younger Dryas is this massive, mass level extinction event.
Right.
And after it, when we came out, the water rose, the seas, the ocean rose 400 feet.
Beginning of this happening, it cooled. And then it warmed back up.
And they think that the flood could have been a meteor that broke off, and instead of hitting an ice cap, it hit the water that caused the water to go up in the atmosphere and create a greenhouse effect that would have caused this rapid warming.
Mm-hmm.
And in this time, the sea level rose by 400 feet.
They think, yep.
Yeah, and the Sahara became the desert that it is today. I mean, there was just a lot of changes going on.
The climate itself and all over was changed drastically.
So this 12,800 years ago, or I'm sorry, coming out of the Younger Dryas would have been the 11,600. That's when they think that this West and
Robert Schoch
and the other Graham Hancock believe that that this would have been the time that the Sphinx would have experienced the weathering events.
Yep.
Now, this blows the dating by the Egyptologists out of the water.
Yep.
I mean, by a huge number.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the right now. They're thinking that the Sphinx was built around 2500 BC, which is like 4,500 years old, which is super freaking old.
Right.
But I mean, if you go back to what these guys are saying, the 6th or 5th millennia, that would push that whole thing back a further 3,000 to 4,000 years.
Right. And that would have been after the Younger Dryas.
Yep.
Where they believe there was this mass re-civilization. Now, it got shot down numerous times by the academic community, if you would, because they said, well, where is any other evidence of a advanced civilization before this? There was never any evidence.
Before the 2500, before the Egyptian, which those periods I think are like, they go back before 2500 BC, but it's not that far.
Well, I have information on that too.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's another side. I'm talking about accepted
right. Yeah.
Archaeological evidence.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so that was all until the 90s. Like, this is not that old. This information that then comes to light.
Yep.
And you could take it from here. Enter.
Yeah, then you run into Göbekli Tepe. They found out in Turkey.
And it's such a cool thing.
Yeah, Göbekli Tepe is a pretty interesting thing. I mean, when I first heard about it, I'm like, okay, this is some like skeptics out of a weird conspiracy theory thing. But no, you start looking at it, and I mean, it's literally this compound of ruins. Then it's not just Göbekli Tepe by itself. There's other ones that haven't even been excavated, and they're all over this region of Turkey.
They think there's 50% of the Göbekli Tepe that is yet to be excavated.
Right.
Too.
That's just it. They're just now digging into it. This guy, I think, is from Germany, the lead scientist there.
Right, and the other guy that you had mentioned earlier, he had passed away. He was the lead
West?
No, the Schlaw, the fathers of this kind of theory.
Oh, Lubitz, or whatever his name was?
Yeah, I'll find it. I'm sorry. There's so many names. This has been like the biggest thing to research.
I think that's who it is. But yeah, I mean, and so Göbekli Tepe, that they know from carbon dating goes back to the 10th millennium BC.
Which would be, 11,000 to 9,000 BCE.
Yep.
Now, okay, we're putting that's
the first evidence they know that it was built.
And okay, so we have to talk about this place more because this is the largest monolith site that they found. Now, monoliths are the giant statues. You could think of Easter Isle.
Yep. Well,
we're going to cover other ones. Easter Isle is the biggest one.
Right.
People.
But there's the heads that we were talking about before the show.
I was going to get to them. The Olmecs.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's those kinds of things.
Olmec heads.
There's like the hinges that you run into, but those are much newer out in England and all that.
Yeah, right. Stonehenge.
So we're talking about massive T-shaped stone pillars that were built. So the oldest known megaliths, right?
Yes.
And I mean, we're talking about, so there's 200 of these pillars and 20 different circles that they've known so far through their different surveys.
Yes.
And each one of these pillars is around 20 feet tall and weighs up to 10 tons. And we're talking...
I've heard, 20 tons is what I read, too.
Well, I'm just quoting one source. These sources are variable, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think we know the site exists, and we know these. You can see pictures of the stuff. So, I mean, it's pretty incredible. Like, you see pictures of the pyramids and explaining how they've got those stones there, and we'll go over some of that, is pretty incredible. But let alone... Even if you go off accepted theory, and that's only 2,500 BC roughly when they built the Sphinx, wouldn't that be pretty insane to think that a further, go back 3 times that?
Yes.
And that's what people are doing this. And this is supposed to be like
more advanced.
Right. It's
yes.
And we're talking about when accepted theory would say these are hunter-gatherer nomads eating berries and fruits and trying to survive off a couple of squirrels. Like, we're barely making fire.
and Joe Rogan has a great debate. Have you seen the debate one with Graham Hancock?
On the skeptic?
Yes, the skeptic. Great debate. And the skeptic has some really good points, and we're going to kind of run off some of those later.
Yeah.
But some of the images of that Göbekli Tepe is just, they carved 3D animals out of the stone.
Yep.
That
very advanced culture.
Like, okay, and let's be honest. If I'm on the boat that Graham Hancock is, that the Sphinx is older. Are you?
I believe it because when you look at the Sphinx, the pictures you see today of it, like it's sitting its paws like on the earth and it's just kind of flat around it. That's not the whole story. Because that part, like where the paw, like the bottom of it's at, it goes down several stories. And there's like there's this pit they excavate every so often. They haven't for a long time. It just fills with sand over time because it's in the desert, on the edge of the desert. And so when it goes down that much further, you can see pictures of these rocks, and it looks like what happens when it rains, and you see water running down the face of the rock. It's just like streams of erosion, and the rock is soft. It's not chiseled to a point or anything.
Right.
It's very well covered over and soft. I'm not a geologist, so I'm not qualified to look at that and say how old that is. But the weathering pattern, if you have, and Robert Schoch is a geologist, he looks at that weathering pattern.
He's not.
He's not?
Oh, wait, Robert Schoch. You're right. I'm sorry. You're
Anthony
right.
West,
You're right.
Anthony West was not.
Yeah.
Robert Schoch, I believe, is the archaeological guy.
And he now teaches at University of Boston.
Yep, he's a professor there.
Yes.
So, I mean, this is a legit guy who's risking his career, it has for a while, on these theories that he believes in.
And I just have to talk about the Göbekli, the statues carved here, okay, and they're saying that
look it up, Göbekli Tepe,
11,000, 9,000 BCE. So we're talking thousands of years before.
And they think the people operated for 2,000 years.
Right, and this is what I go to. I think the Sphinx is older. After doing everything, I think the Sphinx is older. So they put the pyramid building at 2,500 BCE. Okay, so how are we able to do a far more advanced building with far more advanced sculptures? Look at these dogs they carve. Look at the lion head they carve. Look at the faces they carve. And then ask yourself, how did they do that 9,000 BCE?
So you're talking like 7,000 years, or
right.
roughly.
Where did this technology go?
Right.
What
and why
happened?
Why didn't it just explode everywhere?
Yes, and so there's a lot of talk that there was that mass level extinction event happened.
Mm-hmm. The timing of it is too, of when they know Göbekli Tepe was operational, like, when it was like built by the dating.
Yes.
The time frame is too coincidental to not have any impact on it for that 2,000 years that site was active.
Right.
And the thing too, they know that site has younger structures in it too, where it was like damaged and rebuilt. And when they rebuilt it, they weren't using as sophisticated of techniques.
Yes.
It's like they forgot things.
Yes, and the other thing crazy about I have to keep looking it up because it's so weird to say, Göbekli Tepe, is that Göbekli Tepe translates to pot-bellied hill.
Mm-hmm.
Why was it called that, you would ask? Well, they buried it. The reason no one knew about this site is because someone intentionally buried it.
Yep.
I have to be honest, some of the images are haunting. I would like to use that word. Some of the statues don't have bases.
Yeah.
Well,
that happened a lot too, like Egypt, when they knocked the noses off statue, that was a sign of disgrace.
Well, these are statues carved without faces, and they wondered what was up with that, if it was like a deity thing or a god thing, because further away from Göbekli Tepe, they have found busts of people where they're perfectly fine. They knew how to do faces, they knew how to do this stuff, but they just, at this site, they chose not to.
Yeah.
Which is weird. And the animals, there's a dog one that's amazing.
Yeah.
There's
some crazy like demon creatures that are carved too.
And Hancock talked about how there's these people who wrote a book based off the symbolism there.
Yeah.
And they think that it's trying to tell of a meteor strike.
Yeah, I was kind of going there too in my mind, because those events, those kinds of meteor events, like I think it's the torrid meteor stream that we go through every so often. I think twice a year we go through this, but like they know that there's theories about where that came from, but basically we look at it now as like a spectacle in the sky to just admire. But like it has dropped large objects onto the surface of the planet. We know, like that Tuscarora or whatever that, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The one in Russia, that massive explosion in the 1800s. Yeah, they think that was some kind of meteor. I think that did coincide with one of those torrid meteor stream. So I think that's important to note that these, and they the way those comets and other space type events that take place, they're cataloged, and there's evidence of those being cataloged all over different civilizations, and a lot of them use the same imagery.
Yes, and the biggest thing I think Göbekli Tepe suggests is that there were people around before the Younger Dryas.
Yes.
And that they survived this mass level extinction.
And they had technology.
And they had
to build big, impressive things.
And yes, and after this cataclysmic event, after this cataclysm, there was this reemergence of civilization.
Yeah.
And they think that people traveled. There were people who were traveling to different civilizations or different cradles of life and teaching them.
Well, if you think about it too, like we talked about this, if you had something crazy happen now, there'd be pockets of people like gathering together trying to survive, I think, and you'd be trying to find people who knew different things. But the higher, I look at it this way, like it's kind of like a video game. The higher level you go up in skill set, the less of those people there are.
Right. You brought a great one. How many, like, if a terrible tragedy happened, how many people would actually know how to run nuclear reactors?
Yeah. Like, what are the chances? And if there are, like, what are the chances they know how to run every bit of it? Mm-hmm. Because those are massive power facilities.
Right.
And even coal plants and stuff like that. Like, I just feel like it'd be so easy for us to not only not have those people available to help spread that knowledge, and then what would happen is you'd be left with people who had partial knowledge of certain things that could be passed on, but that were not totally understood. It's sort of like how you and I, we both have these cell phones. I know how to work this freaking thing, but I don't know what's going on inside of it all the time. Like, I couldn't take it apart and say, oh, this is doing that, and, the battery, I could probably explain that, but that's it.
Right.
And it's that kind of thing where
it's like an evolutionary game of telephone.
Yeah.
I mean, the game telephone, where, like, maybe these people, after the cataclysm, went around and taught these people near Turkey, taught them how to build the Göbekli Tepe. I'm saying it wrong sometimes, but having fun with it. And that's why you see it built right earlier and then built crappy later, because they left. Hey, the teacher's gone. We don't really need to do it like this.
It's there's other examples of that happening. Like Egypt, when it was conquered, I believe by the Ottomans, they took the best sculptors and artisans from Egypt back with them to do their sculptures and monoliths, and all their kinds of major stone carving work. They took all the best artisans for their own, and then you see this in Egypt. Like, that's when all the work just becomes shoddy. Like, the carvings aren't as good, the paintings aren't as good, and you can just see that they took all the talent away. And it's that kind of thing. Like, if you're left with something less than, you're gonna make do with what you got.
Right.
And so it just. And like we're talking about in Egypt, there's evidence of them using high-speed saws to cut some of these stones. And Göbekli Tepe, they found a bead with a hole drilled through it with like perfect precision, like millimeter precision, like straight through.
So,
and there's evidence inside of that of a high-speed drill being used. And how on earth did that happen?
Yeah, and it has an alignment, right? Göbekli Tepe has a astrological alignment too, right? It's built facing due north, I thought.
I don't remember that, but I believe it does have. Most of these sites have some sort of.
Well, that's what I thought. I think that's an interesting point. So I don't know if you guys know how, like, if you know astrology at all, there's actually a little bit of a science behind it. Like, the house you're born on has to do with what constellation is in the sky. You know, when we're in the house of Leo, like, it has to do with the time
you're born. Yeah.
Born. Okay, well, there's also these huge stints of time where they shift really slowly, but I mean, we know this now. I guess we kind of knew it then, but basically we would say, like thousands of years. And so currently we're in, I think, the house of Cancer. I don't remember. It's not my bag, not my bag, guys, but anyways, long periods of time when you're in a house of a specific thing in astrology, and each house that you're in has a specific, sign, the zodiac, whatever.
Sure.
Okay? So, if the Sphinx would have been built when they claim that it would have been the Robert Schoch
and Anthony West,
it would have actually been in the house of Leo. When if you
would have been in the sky.
Yeah, if you actually watch it on the equinox, again, I'm gonna mess up things, but like the Leo equinox, whatnot, it aligns perfectly with the Sphinx compared.
So significance.
Yes, compared to if they would have built it the 2500 BC, that's the house of Taurus. Which, why would they have built a giant lion, cat thing when it would have been the house of the bull when there was,
Yeah, I'm with you.
I know. I mean,
who's to say? We don't know.
But
I mean, there's the ancient civilizations put a lot of stock in that kind of thing, and whether they were guided by it, we don't know. But it's anecdotal evidence to say that it would make a lot more sense for that to line up.
Right.
I agree.
So, I think this one's fun to talk about. There's this guy named... Too many notes. That's not what he's named. But, I had Chelsea helping me with this stuff, and it kind of got a little...
You guys are crazy. You have like 6 pages of notes, 2 different notebooks.
Oh, yeah.
Post-it note off to the side.
This changed our lives. This really did. It's wild. Okay, so there was this guy named Solon, okay? And Solon lived 600 BC.
Okay.
He takes a trip to Egypt. He's from Greece, okay? Takes a trip to Egypt. He says, when did you people get here? How long have you been here? Yeah. And the guy says, we came here 9,000 years ago after a flood. Okay, 9,000 plus 600 BC. We're at 9,600 BC. Where we live, currently, 2,000, add that together. That's the Younger Dryas.
Yep.
That's like precisely the Younger Dryas. Okay, now who is Solon? Okay, pass some time, we get to 428. That's Plato's great grandfather, the Solon guy, and the story from Solon got passed down through Plato's lineage and generation to Plato, and Plato wrote about Solon traveling and talked about the great city they came from went under, and it was 9,000 years ago, and that's where we get Atlantis from. That's the story of Atlantis. And
makes sense. Yep.
Other interesting thing is this kind of is backed up by the Egyptians too, which I guess you can't really say it's backed up by when the story came from the Egyptians.
Right.
But
they have their own history.
There's something called the Palermo stone, and this is now in Palermo, Italy, and it is
it's a history.
It's a history.
Yep.
It's
chronological.
About the Netcheru.
Yep.
The people who were the original people they claim to be the people who lived with the gods, the Egyptian gods, were the Netcheru. And it identifies pharaohs far before the ones we recognize.
That we know about.
The ones that united the different kingdoms of Egypt. So even Egyptians have artifacts that claim they came from a previous group of people who fled after a massive flood.
Yep.
Which just, I mean, I hate to say, like, so many coincidences make a truth, because that's not the case, but I'm moved at this point. I am moved at this point to feel like the coincidences are scary, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're just...
Well, and there's other evidence of history, historical cultures, right? So you got, and I mean, I don't want to totally dive off, but I think this kind of supports what you're talking about here. Something I was looking into was the Clovis people.
Yes.
Right? All over North America.
Yes.
And, for the longest time, there was this whole Clovis first viewpoint that was really, that was what was supported. It's kind of like the way people think today about how old the Sphinx is and all that.
Yeah.
There's always going to be accepted history, and then others who are trying to either refute that or support their own evidence of otherwise. It's not maybe to refute their point, but it's just saying like there's more to it.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of evidence for these Clovis sites. They're all over. That it was found originally back in New Mexico, and these people were hunting large game, fairly sophisticated, had technology in terms of the types of hunting weapons they're using. They're much less sophisticated than the folks that built Göbekli Tepe.
Sure.
But we're talking about a civilization that existed around 13,400 years ago. So, I mean, we're going back even before some of the stuff. Well, not before.
Yeah,
I'm talking before
right
BC.
After the Younger Dryas.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm talking about maybe even before that.
Right. I'm sorry.
And so, like, they've got... So there's evidence, like, it's not too crazy to think about these fairly sophisticated civilizations living. And, they think it's kind of nuts that the Clovis people, they're finding these sites all over North America.
Yeah.
And it's the same technology. So... was it the fact that the Clovis people existed ubiquitously, or did they have something they came here and they just taught, others, that technology? Why were they all using the same spear points?
And that's why I think we should jump back to the Olmecs.
Yeah, and there's other... So
yes.
we're giving other examples.
Yes, the Olmecs. If you don't know who they are, I didn't either. Okay, the Olmecs were given that name by the Aztecs.
Yep, pre-Aztec.
Yep, it meant rubber people.
Central America.
So the Olmecs were the precursor to the Mayans and the Aztecs.
Yep.
Now the Aztec calendar is actually the Olmec calendar.
Right.
That's where it came from.
They took it, yep.
Now, that's where they find these monoliths that look like they are maybe from Africa or Polynesia.
Yeah, the looks on the faces of these carved heads they look like they're of African
descent.
descent.
The wide bridge of the nose.
They don't look largely like people that are native to North America, Central
America. And there's some carvings there, and one of them is this serpent, or it's like a serpent.
Yep.
And in the bottom there's this man, and he's holding a bag.
Yep.
And this bag is also found in other carvings across the world, and Graham calls it the man bag.
Right.
But he thinks that could link back to, I want to say it said Somalia, the people from that area. And he thinks that maybe those people survived the Younger Dryas and then set out to
It's unclear.
The world.
Yeah, we're not sure.
Right. We're not clear, and that's.
But we know that they were doing things like this. And why are those hieroglyphs?
And one of the things the skeptic in that debate pushes back, he says, well, how do we know it's just not the hunter-gatherers, that they're just more advanced than we thought they were? And I love the pushback to that is when we assume they're hunter-gatherers, that takes energy to support a mass amount of people to have enough infrastructure to build something like Göbekli Tepe is something we did not consider hunter-gatherers capable of doing.
Correct. Why would they? Because they're more sustenance, right? Survivors. Like, they don't have a surplus of agricultural. Like, usually it takes agriculture to make the leap to civilization.
And they
have to have a surplus of resources.
They don't think anybody lived at Göbekli Tepe.
Right, they think it was just
a temple or
site.
a religious site or something. Yeah. So these hunter-gatherers are moving these 20-foot tall, multiple-ton blocks in their spare time.
Yeah.
Like, without agriculture, without... Why? Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And the timing is way before what we know now to be right.
Yeah.
The problem is Egyptologists, it doesn't seem like they're wanting to disagree with each other. It seems like they all get their information from the same source, and they don't want to push back. They lose a lot of interest if they found maybe they weren't the oldest.
I think that it's some of this, you built your whole life on a whole concept and supported that and fought everything to make that the way it is, and anything to refute that's kind of hurting your baby.
Yes.
That makes sense.
So, we mentioned this earlier. I wanted to get on this. Now, what is advanced? When you think of advanced civilization, there's three things that I kind of think that's seals that. A written language.
Okay.
Animal husbandry or domestication.
Agriculture.
And metallurgy. Okay. Being able to work with metal. I will put forth, in my opinion, that it actually might be more advanced not to use those.
I think astronomy is in the top three for an advanced society or civilization. It has to have astronomy as part of it.
Which is very impressive considering the...
Because a lot of the ones that
astronomical significance of where the Great Pyramids are placed.
Yeah, because that's how a lot of them developed mathematics. They know that the Mayans were using calculus.
Yeah.
And they discovered it on their own, apart from the Chinese.
Right.
So the astronomy is a big thing. Being able to track lunar astrological cycles, and whether or not there's certain significance to them is beside the point. They could pinpoint where they put their freaking monoliths and everything else to have the sun hit a certain spot to track stuff. To spend the generations it must have taken to develop that technology.
Right.
So that to me's got to be advanced.
So, but no, can we take these specific ones on? I would push back that a written language may not be an advanced thing.
Okay.
And this is my pushback on this. Not my ideas. I'm stealing this from Robert Graham. But he said, he talks about Horus, the Egyptian god, after they came up with hieroglyphics, said, what if these writings are bad? What if they leave the land and without them goes the understanding about what they really mean?
Mm-hmm.
I see what, if me and you have an experience that means something and is meaningful, we could probably pass that experience on better orally.
Well,
we could evoke emotions.
Dude, there's oral traditions, like the Aborigines. They have large oral traditions, long-standing, and that's how they pass down their stories and creation and all that.
And let's say me and you are traveling somewhere, okay? And I'm having, I need emergency heart surgery or something. We'll say something easier that you could probably do.
Right.
Yeah, we'll make it a little easier. Let's say I need,
you know... help.
Yeah, I have one of those things where I need you to, cut my leg or whatever so I get the blood off it. I can't remember what that's called right now. All you medical people. Anyways, let's say there's a procedure that Brent could probably do if someone walked him through it. Would I want Brent to have to go through 8-10 years of medical school to learn that procedure? Or would I sure as hell hope there's somebody on the phone that could pass information to Brent orally that would get him to accomplish that?
I think I might be able to... So... I would argue there's a point where the oral meets a maximum capacity in the sense that because there are oral traditions, but they don't usually pass down super complex. They might pass down how to grow crops or something like that, which
sure.
that could be complex, but let's just say that it's relatively simple compared to some mathematical formula. Like typically, in my mind, if you're gonna like share that or even be able to teach it or understand it yourself, you're gonna have to capture it somehow. Yeah, you could keep it all up here.
Yeah.
I more or less feel like there's a point of diminishing return with the oral culture where you could just get it down and much faster written, and then people could feed off that.
I totally agree with you, and I'm not trying to say we shouldn't have a written language.
No.
I do understand where you can write something down and lose the importance of it.
So is that what you're getting at with this? Is how do we lose these technologies?
No.
Or?
I'm just saying that I think our ideas of advanced may not always be right.
Yeah, and okay, you could go in different angles for that too.
And so let's dive into the next one then.
Okay.
I think we all agree we don't like caging animals now. Like I think the way we've domesticated animals now has turned into something horrific. Like we all see the PETA videos where like the cows are crammed, there's cows that are born deformed and they don't die right when they try to slaughter them. I mean, it's gross. Like when we used to hunt animals, they'd go out and they'd hunt and be ceremonial. I mean, we'd use every part of the animal. It wasn't.
So you're saying that advanced in terms of valued.
Yeah.
So I don't disagree. There's probably better ways to do it, but I'm sure as heck not going to stop eating hamburger.
I'm not telling you to.
Yeah.
I
don't say you're going there, but I think that.
I'm just saying how we do it today. Like
maybe you should rethink.
Yes.
Advanced. Sure.
And metallurgy.
Okay.
Look at the havoc it causes on our planet. Like, just even mining, go bigger. Like, we mine so many things now. Like, mining is a
the scale of it's the problem, sure.
It is. And that's why, what if there was a civilization back there that could have, but chose not to do this?
Sure.
You know, like...
Well, that's where you get the difference between the conquistadors and the North American inhabitants before they got here.
Right.
Even some of them were smelting and working with metals, but they weren't, they didn't have London in the, before the industrial age was so many coal fires you couldn't even breathe.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that's this is where we're going to depart the realm of fact and go into the realm of myth and religion and I don't know what else to call it.
Sure.
Abstract. Journey now with us into the abstract. Other people had these ideas that there were older things, that there were older religions, that there were older people, that there were anything.
Yep.
And I'm sure there's many philosophies that have done this, but the one that really jumped out at me in doing this research was called Theosophy.
Mm-hmm.
So Theosophy is formed by Helena Blavatsky.
Okay.
Or HPV, because she has another name. I can't pronounce it. Patron, I think. Helena Patron.
HPV is not a very flattering.
But you'll remember it. That's the point. That's the whole point. So, she's a little girl, okay? She's a little girl, and she finds her grandpa's library. And in this library, all these books filled with the secrets of the world, the old world, if you will. And guess what he is? A Freemason.
Mm-hmm.
So, he's a Freemason. Freemasons are interesting. Because we'll do a show on them.
Yeah.
But the basic idea says, these guys were the pyramid builders, and they claim that their technology came from Atlantis. There's a lot of Atlantis in this damn show.
Yeah.
Then it popped up organically. Like, I wasn't, searching ties to Atlantis.
Yeah.
It was like everything I searched went back to Atlantis. It went back to this idea that there was this bigger, greater civilization at a time that we came out of and had to re-emerge from. And the Theosophical Society, or Theosophical folk, if you will, led by this Helena, whatever names.
Yeah, we get you.
Yeah, thank you. Less Russian names I have to say, the better. So, she goes on these quests throughout her life. She travels the world. She goes to Canada for a while to meet some of the shamans up there. She goes to Tibet, has a hard time getting in, gets smuggled in. This is under British rule. So she ends up this loathing of the British Empire, too, which is just, I don't know, kind of funny. She writes this book, and it was called... well, that was after. So she starts she travels the world, has all these experiences, meets with shamans, comes to America in 1875, starts the Theosophical Society. It's now there's the Theosophical in America, but their whole point is divining wisdom in search for the ultimate truth.
Okay.
Now, this lady had these ideas that were very, I don't know, they're out there, but she had this idea that there were root people. And these root people, she ended up using the word Aryan a lot, and this is pre-Nazi, but she had this idea that there were these root people that...
Like the original people.
Original people, and they practiced the original religion, that all other religions came from this root religion. And that it... that these Aryan people were people who had survived... I'm mixing these two, but from what I take, it sounds like she was saying these root people survived this mass extinction. These are the older people. Yes. Maybe they are the ones who survived the younger dryas. Not terminology she would have been able to work with in her time, but these were kind of her ideas.
Yeah.
And she thought that certain root people could not evolve past a certain point. They would actually stay at a certain level, and that the people who came back after were taught different. They were different. I don't use the word evolve more. That's not what I want to say. I don't think that's what she said. But I will say some of her teachings got taken a little off kilter, if you will. And basically, Theosophy steals a lot from Buddhism and stuff like that. Steals a lot from a lot of religions and kind of finds I would say, my favorite parts of them. But she writes this book, and it gets in the hands of Hitler, and Hitler takes this book and really twists some of this Aryan stuff into being propaganda that he used. Now, if you read the book and stuff, she actually counted the Jewish people as part of the Aryan people. So how Hitler turned it to that... well, it doesn't match up with her original.
He picked what he wants out of her book.
Yeah, and it sounds like she didn't like Jews either. It sounds like she was not a fan of the Jewish people either. I got that from one video, though, and I don't have a lot to base it off of. I'll link to the video. You guys can decide for yourself.
Right.
She is not the topic here. But she goes on after these life travels and stuff like that. She's claimed to have had a communication with this dead person, right? And it ended up being a person that was alive. I know, it's a freaking weird story, and I'm not going to go any further into that, but look it up. All in the video. So she starts, this Helena H.P. Blavatsky starts the American Theosophical Society. Divining wisdom says each religion has divine wisdom, and they value the individual study and experience and insight rather than rely on dogma. That's like preaching to me. Those are things I felt very akin to when that was in the reading. Interesting enough, she was the person who taught Gandhi. Gandhi learned his stuff from her, and Thomas Edison was in her Theosophical Society too.
Interesting.
Yeah, light bulb dude. So I've looked into Theosophy quite a bit, and it's really interesting stuff, especially like the stuff about the root religion and how it branches off. Some of the stuff you could take away from that is that the Eskimo people and stuff like that. Help me out. What are they called?
Man, you're reaching there. I was gonna say Eskimos.
All right.
What do you mean?
Inuit.
Oh, they're okay. Yes.
Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah. Sounds right.
Yeah. The Inuit people. They would be very close to the root people and very close to practicing that root religion.
Interesting.
It is interesting. And
I don't really know anything about them, to be honest with you.
So now I'm going to take it into my whole little theory to throw at you.
Okay.
And this combined a lot of people theories. I don't want to take full credit for this, but I do think this is an interesting idea. What if we were advanced in different ways, where we weren't doing the animal husbandry, where we had more of a respect for the world? What if we lived in the concept that we weren't better than anybody on the earth, but we were part of it?
Okay.
And what if the shift that happened was this idea that we were better, that we were the superior beings on earth, and that's what led us to conquering the elements, conquering like the things, the animal domestication and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It's like I said earlier with the whole like saying that God put us here to do and to rule over, right? In whatever capacity. Yeah, I definitely could see how people could make that leap. It's the same kind of thing, right? You're granted superiority by God in my example, but in yours, it's just I decided I'm better because I can think about these things and I can talk and I am better, right? Because the dog doesn't run up to me and say, "How you doing, Ralph?"
Exactly. So this is a quote from one of the Theosophical readings. Humans are sparks of the divine trapped in the material world who desire to return to their spiritual world.
Interesting.
And again, Theosophists kind of bring together a bunch of different religions or whatnot, if you will.
Sorry, I was up till 3.
I understand. I know, kids are rough. But they draw, again, heavy on Buddhism, heavy on Hinduism. So there's talk of reincarnation and stuff through Theosophy.
Yeah.
And I was going to say also, this ties into this other weird idea that getting crazier, that maybe the mass extinction was actually caused by us, we caused it. And one of the interesting things they point out is, look at the story in the Bible. Why does God flood the earth? Well, it's because we've gotten away from his teachings or whatnot.
Right.
And in the Egyptian thing, they talk about it's Horus, I believe, talking. I played that for you. There are links to everything.
Okay, yeah.
But there's a teaching in Egypt far before Christianity talking about how God would clean the world with floods and then with fire and stuff like that.
The Indians have their own.
Yes.
Like where the gods had a battle and they describe it as like, it almost sounds like a nuclear war.
Right, and there's these weird things, like we find these nuclear glass.
When I say Indians, I'm sorry. I mean India.
India, yeah. Nuclear glass has been found throughout the world that dates around the time of Younger Dryas, which would coincide with
meteor strikes.
A meteor, but it could be nuclear, it could be a nuclear thing or something like that.
It's possible.
But I just think it's interesting that in all the religions that you go to, and even it seems like these ancient civilizations, that mankind is always in some part to blame for the flood or for the downfall or the or something, which
fallible.
I don't know what we can take away from that. I mean, it would be really interesting to me that we are on this repeat cycle where we have this awakening that starts to come and it gets squashed out. Like the Anthony West guy talked about how he kept getting just squished by all the academics and stuff because it didn't fit their world. Then all of a sudden we find Gobekli Tepe, and it's really throwing this worldview that we had for the longest time out the window.
I know. Yeah, and that, it beats the people who were doing that Clovis first thing, where they were saying that those were the original people.
And for the people who push back and say, well, if it was an advanced civilization, where's the plastic cups? Where's the...
Yeah.
I push back that our mindset today of what advanced was may not have matched up with what the other was.
And that's totally right. I mean, at the end of the day, I may not have been following along with where you were trying to go with that earlier, but just because you're advanced, I mean, think about the Amazon. We were talking about that.
Yes.
The people in the Amazon where they're doing this LiDAR stuff and they're finding all these temples in massive cities that used to be, that went away. Largely, we know a lot of those people were wiped out by smallpox that just spread like wildfire. Right. So it killed like the Incas, got wiped, the Mayans, the Aztecs, all got...
We talk about that in our tribalism episode. Racism is very much a genetic thing.
Yeah.
Because of these incidents.
Yeah, and like... they know, like in the Amazon, they built these massive things, right? And the first conquistadors that went down through the Amazon River system reported seeing cities of millions of people, and then later, hundreds of years later, when they actually made it that far, they thought it was all made up, but not realizing if it was there, it would have been covered by the jungle, because the jungle eats these cities. They have to be maintained.
Yes.
And if they're not, it in a matter of decades, when we're talking about hundreds of years before all these things got explored,
right?
It doesn't take that long to just wipe it off. Like, erase it almost. Like, the nature takes it back. And these things, these peoples had technology, astronomy, but also they were the Amazon dirt.
Yeah, right.
The dirt in the Amazon is not very fertile.
Yep.
But the peoples that lived there, ancient peoples, developed this kind of dirt they made that they could use to make it fertile. Like, it's crazy. It literally makes it fertile. It has microbes and all kinds of nutrients in it.
Go poop in the field.
Yeah, right. It's your turn. Like, all right, you got a stone tablet I can read.
Not the stinky field.
Yeah, right.
Yes, the stinky field.
But still, yeah.
So I think we can say definitively that history is not accurate, and I think
it's not complete.
It's not complete. The funnest questions I think to ask is, what happened? At what point did we decide that? What point did we decide we were better than nature? At what point did we decide that we had control over this earth? Because I do think that's kind of what we see in the rise and fall of these civilizations, is this return to nature. Like, I mean, of course, it's probably some simple answer where there was just meteors
well, I mean, or a combination of things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's none of these we really don't know for sure. But look at more modern disasters like Chernobyl. I mean, that, like, they literally can't. The animals and it's like a wildlife refuge now because nothing else can live there really. And not that that's a great example of a reset because it's radioactive.
Yeah.
But those kinds of events can happen. I mean, just imagine if there was a massive solar flare that wiped out the power grids and, like, literally fried them. It would take us forever to get them back up. We would lose the supermarkets, like we would have no power. Like, we'd have to figure out a way to survive for an extended period without electricity like that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, we were able to do it before. We were able to transport ice long distances and stuff like that.
The infrastructure's not there now, though.
And it was a lot less people. A heck of a lot less people. I mean, and that's where I think there's lessons to be learned about living off the land so artificially that it really couldn't support the numbers that we had.
Well, yeah, we've domesticated. Like, look at all the crops. I mean, I don't know how many crops you could plant now that would actually survive on their own without advanced knowledge and the combines and the weed killers and everything else put on them, you know?
If you want to look for some information, too, on the Younger Dryas, I really recommend the two things to look up for dating it is the KT layer, and then the other one is, I think it's called the black layer. And that's supposed to be the beginning and the end. And from what it sounds, I mean,
like again, the major fauna die-offs and stuff, yeah.
I mean, yeah, massive extinction. I mean, just huge.
Because that's when they were saying, like, the forest was creeping north, and then that event took place, and then, like, all the cold.
Yes. Well, and okay, so I don't know if you guys know history. Where do civilizations, form? Well, they form on water sources because you gotta have water.
Gotta have water. Gotta have sustainable animal population for at least the basics of hunter-gatherer.
Okay, so we have all these civilizations by the water, and then sea level rise by 400 feet.
Yep.
Okay, we should be doing digs.
And we do find that.
Yes, and we should be doing more. Like that Graham guy says, why aren't we doing excavations of the shelf? It's not like the ocean would have swept it all out. It rose. Yeah. And he also says we should be doing digs in the Sahara because we'd probably find...
It wasn't always a desert.
It wasn't always desert. It was a rainforest, and it was...
I don't know what you do with all that sand, though. How do you dig in the desert?
And that's why people don't, because it's hard. So I think there's a lot of really good questions here.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if Theosophy seems like a weird, strange thing to get into.
Yeah, we're not trying to recruit you.
We're not. But I would like to say, there's this other thing, and this is the last thing I'll really do on this topic. What do I do with my apple, Brent?
You ate it.
I know. There's this thing called witch cult hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to Wikipedia, it says, it's a discredited theory that proposes the witch trials of the early modern period were an attempt to suppress a pre-Christian pagan religion that had survived the Christianization of Europe. I think this ties into this. I think this ties into this idea that we used to be different. I really feel like the whole, there's two kinds of people. I'm going to say this. I think there were two kinds of people. I think there were civilizations that thought they could do what they want with the world, that they saw themselves superior to the world around them,
mm-hmm.
and there were people who saw themselves as equal, as stewards of God's gift of this planet to us. Yeah. There still are.
There's us, and then there are still hunter-gatherers.
Yes.
Tribes we haven't contacted, tribes we can't contact.
I know. I'm saying more from a conspiracy, like.
No, you're right. I'm saying that we've managed to manifest that again.
Yes. And this witch cult hypothesis was pioneered by two German scholars, and basically they came out with this in the early 19th century, and they just got ripped apart. It was called pseudoscience. And they said that they didn't do the process right, but they didn't really attack the concept. And it would just be interesting, if you would, that as Wes says, the ruling religion of the day does not like change, does not want to upset the ebb and flow of things.
Sure.
And when this came out, it was just starting to be academia. When Wes came out, it was full-blown science is the religion of the day, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, you could look at the Crusades. Was the Crusades an attempt to squash the proto-religion?
The Crusades was an attempt to conquer and spread Christianity. Because they believed they needed to wipe out the Muslim heathens at the time.
But why? Because maybe they were closer to that proto-religion.
I think that's definitely something that's totally possible, but I would be more along the lines to believe that it was probably just wanting to spread one religion over another.
I don't disagree with you. I just don't think that's correct. That is the right answer. I think you're right that that's what they were doing, but I don't think that's a good thing to do.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. Totally follow you there.
So I really want to do more on this whole idea that there was this pushback against this idea. It feels like just throughout history, anytime we try to push back to say that we are stewards of the earth,
mm-hmm.
there's pushback. And nowadays we see it in Democrats and Republicans, where we want to talk about climate change, but Republicans really, push back. It's like they think that there's not a problem we can invent a solution for. And it's not going to be the case. We can't deal with 400-foot sea rise.
No.
There are things that we cannot fix. And, I just think it's interesting, out of all the prophecies that, with Jesus and the flood and Noah, and then you hear the Egyptian one, and Greece kind of quotes the flood too, but 100 years later, I just think it's interesting that it always has to do with something with man. Like man losing their way, losing their touch.
Well, it's always a punishment, too.
As a punishment. And I don't know, how can there not be somebody that sees some parallels to that with today? It looks like we ignore the signs that the earth is getting bad. We ignore our neighbor who's drowning from sea rise, because we say, well, it's not us.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's, if you talk about, practical application of this stuff, there's some parts of it where you're like, look, we're not going to be able to get enough money or resources to save all the coastlines, so all you folks are going to have to move inland.
Yep.
And then...
Hope you like Montana or the Dakotas.
There's other levels of, technology. I think we're on the cusp of certain things like electric cars and things like that's not going to move the needle that much, but I think you get what I'm saying is I believe that people in general want to do the right thing. I think that a lot of them are lazy and or don't know what to do.
So we didn't touch on this.
I don't know what to do.
I want to get on this just because we're still here.
Okay.
We learned about the pyramids, that there are those we know about the stones surrounding the pyramids. We know that they each weigh about 2.5 tons or something like that.
Right, the stones on the outside.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've watched videos on this, doing the research here, but there's these tombs, or they call them temples, I think they call them.
Inside?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the King's Chamber,
there's
the Queen's Chamber.
But above that there's 5
antechambers.
Mm-hmm. And the roofs and the floors are made up of granite
70
beams.
Tons. Yeah.
And they weigh between 60 and 70 tons apiece. They're 300 feet up in the air. There has never been a documented thing I could find that tries to explain how those heavy things got there.
Yeah.
It.
However they built the thing from the ground up, when they were ready for that, they somehow brought those suckers up there too and put them down there, yeah.
But there's no talk of that.
No, I know.
I mean, that's just, and I think that lends itself to the idea that maybe there was an
they
advanced
can't explain
civilization.
That's why
or there was an advanced civilization before.
Well, we know they were advanced because they did these things. We just don't know how the hell they did it. You could come up with whatever you want. Like,
I think we could argue that the pyramids that surround those structures are much older than the things they're surrounding. I think you could argue that the internal structures of the pyramids may be older than the external.
Could be. I haven't read anything about that.
That was one of the things Graham talks about.
You
know, and again, the big pushback, I just think it's fun. I'm sorry. The big idea that the Theosophists have and such is that we used to have a different reason for life, and it was to find immortality. It was this idea that we could gain a sense of immortality through whatever means that they had. And I think that's kind of been lost and squashed.
Could be, yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting stuff.
I'm not thinking about that.
We got to do a show on the Freemasons.
Yeah.
Because they keep popping up everywhere, too. So.
Cool.
I don't know, guys. It's been a wild ride.
It's a lot.
It is. It really, really is. Check out that. If I was going to tell you to check out things, check out the Sphinx structure. Check out West.
Yep.
Check out
John Anthony West. Graham Hancock. Robert Schoch.
Yep. And great stuff with them in the links below.
Mm-hmm.
And then also check into that Göbekli Tepe.
Yep.
And there's the...
Check out the Clovis people.
Yes.
Denisovan people.
And what was the other one? The heads.
I always forget about that one.
The Olmecs.
Yes. Yeah, that's a cool one too.
Olmecs. And see what you guys think. And see... Yeah. And then check out the Theosophical Society. I will say there's one close to me here. I'm going to try to go check out a meeting. So you might end up with a show strictly on Theosophy. I love their whole thing is about they're just in search of the truth. I feel like we try to find truth here.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Is our goal.
Definitely.
So, and they say that anybody in the search of proof is already a Theosophist, even if they don't know it.
Cool.
So maybe we're already honorary inductees.
Never know.
Never know. So hope you haven't lost you in this crazy world, and I hope you had fun. It was fun to research. I am hooked on this. It's really changed my perspective on things, and I'm going to keep looking for the root religion. I'm hooked on that idea. So let us know what you think in the comments below, and watch some of our links, and make your own mind up.
That's right. We always expect you guys to check it out, too. Don't just take our word for it.
So, anything else?
No, I think this was good. A nice episode and something different. And we'll look forward to doing something next week.
Sounds good. Have a nice day. Have a nice week.
Take care.